All right, so let's jump into this deep dive today.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at reconciliation in Australia.
Sounds good.
And, I know that you have a lot of experience in this area.
I do, yes.
And you've actually been able to look through this stack of articles and reports that listeners have sent to us.
I have, yeah. It's been a really interesting read.
Yeah, so we've pulled out excerpts from this document called Topic 1 Reconciliation.pdf.
Okay.
And it's fascinating because it kind of covers everything from definitions
Right.
and historical context
Yeah.
to even a really controversial case study, which we'll get to later.
Definitely. It's a great overview of the whole landscape.
So maybe a good place to start is just like, what are we actually talking about when we say
Yeah.
reconciliation in Australia?
So Reconciliation Australia defines it as strengthening relationships between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and non-Indigenous Australians
Okay.
for the benefit of all Australians.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's really about
Yeah.
like a benefit for everyone.
Yeah. Not just sort of addressing past wrongs, but
It's not just about the past, it's about building a better future together.
so it's like a forward-looking kind of thing.
It is, very much so. And it's not a one-time fix. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah. That makes sense because I imagine it's pretty complex.
It is. It requires honest, sometimes difficult conversations about Australia's past and present.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So the document also mentions this thing called the 5 dimensions of reconciliation.
Yes.
Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so think of these as different facets of the reconciliation journey.
Okay.
So you have things like race relations,
Okay.
which focuses on overcoming racism,
Right.
building trust and respect between people.
So kind of like that interpersonal level?
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's equality and equity,
Okay.
which is about making sure the First Nations people's unique rights are recognized and upheld.
And that's where things like the Closing the Gap initiative come in, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Closing the Gap is a great example of this in action. It aims to reduce disadvantages faced by Indigenous Australians in things like health, education, and employment.
I've heard about Closing the Gap, but honestly,
Yeah.
I'm a little fuzzy on the details.
Okay, so Closing the Gap is this long-term strategy with specific targets
Okay.
to improve the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples.
Okay.
And these targets cover things like life expectancy,
Right.
child mortality,
Yeah.
education, and employment.
It's like really practical measures.
It is. It's about achieving true equality of opportunity and outcome for all Australians.
So that's a huge part of it.
Absolutely.
What are some of the other dimensions?
Well, the third one is institutional integrity.
Okay.
And this is about ensuring our political, business, and community institutions are creating more opportunities for First Nations people.
So that things like more representation?
It could be things like that, yeah.
Okay.
Increasing representation in leadership roles, or ensuring First Nations communities have a voice in decision-making
Okay.
that affects them.
So it's kind of like not just about individual attitudes, but changing systems and structures.
It's about systems and structures, yeah.
Okay. What about the last 2 dimensions?
All right, so the fourth one is unity.
Okay.
And this one focuses on embedding First Nations histories and cultures and rights into our shared national identity.
So that's a really interesting one because I guess that's about
It is, yeah.
like how Australia sees itself.
Absolutely. And one example of how we might achieve this is through constitutional recognition.
Right. And that's a
Yeah,
big
A
conversation
big and complex one.
going on in
Where am I
Australia.
going?
Yeah. Okay. So that's 4. What about the last one?
All right, so the fifth and final dimension is historical acceptance.
Okay.
And this one focuses on understanding our history, acknowledging the wrongs of the past,
Yeah.
and making a commitment to learn from them.
So it's about facing that truth.
Yeah.
And then using that
The knowledge
to
to...
build a better future.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful.
It is.
Now, the document also talks about a different term, conciliation. Why do some First Nations people prefer that?
Well, what's fascinating is that the word reconciliation can imply a return to a harmonious state that never actually existed.
I see. Yeah.
Some First Nations people feel that conciliation is more accurate because it focuses on building new relationships
Right.
and recognizing that colonization disrupted any pre-existing balance.
Conciliation. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
It really does kind of shift the perspective.
It does.
It acknowledges that there is work to be done
Yes.
to create something new,
Exactly.
something equitable.
It emphasizes building a path forward based on truth, justice, and respect.
That's great. And this document also kind of delves into the history of the reconciliation movement here
It does, yes.
in Australia. And it mentions that the Council for Aboriginal Reconciliation was established in 1991.
Yeah, way back then, which seems like a significant moment. What was their role?
So they were tasked with promoting reconciliation in all sorts of different ways.
Okay.
They facilitated national conversations, provided education, importantly consulted with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities
Okay.
to determine what would help to further reconciliation efforts.
So they spent a decade kind of laying the groundwork for what reconciliation
They did,
could look like
They did.
in Australia.
Absolutely.
So did they achieve what they set out to do?
Well, after 10 years of work, they acknowledged in their final report that true reconciliation was still far off.
So even after 10 years of like focused effort,
It was clear
that there was a long way to go.
there was a lot more to do.
Yeah.
So what happened when their term came to an end?
One of their final acts was to help establish Reconciliation Australia in 2001,
Okay.
which became the leading voice for reconciliation in the country. And they are responsible for developing the Reconciliation Action Plan. Oh, the REPs.
Yeah, the RP program.
So REPs, that's something we hear about all the time now,
We do, yes.
especially in a corporate world.
Absolutely.
When did that program start?
The RAP program formally launched in 2006.
Okay.
And RAP is basically a strategic document that guides organizations on how to put reconciliation principles into practice.
So it's not just about making statements.
It's
about actually taking
action.
action.
Yeah.
Can you give us an overview of what a RAP actually entails?
Sure. So it provides a framework
Okay.
to demonstrate their commitment to reconciliation, and it outlines steps they can take
Okay.
to build relationships, respect, and opportunities for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples.
I see. So it's really like a plan.
It is, and there are actually 4 different types of RAPs,
Oh, okay.
designed for organizations with varying levels of experience.
So it's kind of like they can start where they are
Yeah,
and then gradually get more involved over time.
exactly. They can start with a Reflect RAP, then move to an Innovate RAP,
Okay.
then a Stretch RAP, and finally an Elevate RAP.
Wow. So there's like a whole
There's a whole pathway.
pathway they can go on.
There is.
But I'm curious, even with a framework like this,
Yeah.
can things still go wrong?
They absolutely can, and the document actually highlights a stark example of this.
Oh.
The case of Rio Tinto and the Yukon Gorge.
Okay, yeah, that was a huge story.
It was.
Can you remind us what happened?
So in 2020,
Yeah.
Rio Tinto made the decision to destroy the Yukon Gorge
Yeah.
in Western Australia.
Right. And this wasn't just any gorge.
It wasn't. It was
Yeah.
a 46,000-year-old sacred site
Wow.
of immense cultural significance to the Putukunti, Kurama, and Pinakura people.
So that destruction caused outrage
It did.
across Australia and even internationally.
Absolutely.
It really highlighted the need for
Yeah.
stronger protections for Indigenous cultural heritage.
Yeah, it really did.
What were the repercussions for Rio Tinto?
Well, Reconciliation Australia took the unprecedented step of suspending Rio Tinto from the RAP program.
Wow, so they were actually
Yeah.
suspended from the program.
Yes, it sent a clear message that actions speak louder than words.
Yeah, that's a really powerful
Was.
statement to make.
It was.
That even companies with seemingly strong reconciliation commitments
Yeah.
can
It
make
can make huge mistakes.
huge mistakes.
Yeah.
It's kind of a sobering reminder
It is.
that genuine reconciliation requires
Ongoing vigilance. Yeah.
ongoing vigilance
Yeah.
and a deep commitment
Yeah.
to understanding and respecting the rights and perspectives of First Nations people.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about definitions, historical context, the complexities of the RAP program.
We have.
But what does this all mean
Yeah.
for organizations and individuals who actually want to contribute to reconciliation?
It's a great question and one that we'll delve into in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, great. Well, stay tuned then.
Yeah.
We'll be right back after the break.
So, we often think about reconciliation as like these big gestures or sweeping policy changes,
Yeah.
but really it starts with each and every one of us.
So you're saying individuals have a role to play.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's kind of empowering, actually.
It is.
But I think a lot of people might feel like, where do we even begin?
I think the first step is simple but crucial education.
Yeah.
We need to understand the true history of Australia, the impact of colonization, and the challenges that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities still face.
Yeah, I think some people might say, well, that was the past. Why dwell on it?
Right.
But the reality is the past has a direct impact on the present.
Absolutely. Without understanding the historical context,
Yeah.
we can't fully grasp the complexities of reconciliation
Hmm.
in the present.
So it's about acknowledging that there's
Yeah.
intergenerational trauma,
Yeah, the systemic disadvantages.
the racism that still exists.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we go about educating ourselves?
Well, there are tons of resources.
Okay.
A great starting point is seeking out books and articles written by Indigenous authors.
Okay.
There are also some amazing podcasts and documentaries
Right.
that center First Nations voices and perspectives.
Yeah, and I think being open to having
Yes,
those difficult conversations.
absolutely. It's about listening, learning,
Mm-hmm.
and being willing to unlearn things that we might have been taught
Yeah.
or assumed to be true.
Okay, so education is a crucial first step.
Yeah.
But what about actions?
Okay. Well, the good news is there are so many things you can do.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be a grand gesture.
Okay.
One of the most impactful things
Yeah.
is to support Indigenous businesses and artists.
Oh, I love that idea.
Yeah,
Because it's like you're voting with your wallet.
exactly.
You're supporting those businesses,
Yeah.
attending those events,
Absolutely.
and you're also learning about the culture.
And you're experiencing the incredible diversity and richness of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some other ways individuals can contribute?
Something as simple as attending a community event in your area
Okay.
can make a difference. And if you have the time,
Yeah.
volunteering can be an incredibly rewarding way to connect with and support Indigenous organizations.
Oh, yeah. Volunteering is amazing.
It is.
And sometimes I think just listening
Yes.
is the most important thing.
It's so important.
Just creating space for Indigenous people to
Yes,
share
absolutely.
their stories, their perspective,
Yeah.
without judgment.
Without interruption, just listen.
We've spoken about the Uluru Statement from the Heart a few times.
We have, yeah.
Can you remind us what it calls for
Sure.
and how individuals can support this movement?
So the Uluru Statement from the Heart is a landmark document
Okay.
that calls for two key things.
Yeah.
Constitutional recognition for Indigenous Australians
Okay.
and a voice to Parliament.
Right. And essentially it's about giving.
It's about giving Indigenous Australians a say in the decisions that affect them,
Okay.
their communities, their cultures.
So how can individuals actually support this movement?
Well, you can sign the Uluru Statement online
Okay.
to show your support.
Yeah.
You can write to your local MP urging them to take action.
Mhm.
And you can have those respectful conversations
Yeah.
with family and friends about the importance of the Uluru Statement.
So it's really about using our voices,
It is.
however we can,
However you can.
to amplify that call for justice.
Yeah, and recognizing that this isn't just the responsibility of Indigenous Australians.
Yeah.
It's something all Australians need to be engaged in.
So we're all in this together.
We are.
We need to work together to create a society where
Yeah.
everyone feels valued.
Valued, respected, heard.
Yeah, our destinies are kind of intertwined.
They are.
We can't just sit back
We can't.
and wait for someone else to do the work.
No, reconciliation requires active participation, empathy, a willingness to step outside our comfort zones.
And recognizing that this isn't like a destination. It's a
journey.
journey.
Yeah.
It's ongoing.
It is, and one area where reconciliation is particularly important is the construction and resource industries.
Okay. Yeah. Why is that?
Well, think about it. These industries often operate on land that holds immense cultural significance to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples.
Right. And sometimes that land contains
Sometimes it contains irreplaceable cultural heritage sites.
like the Jukin Gorge.
Exactly. We saw what happened there.
So reconciliation in those industries isn't just a moral imperative.
It's not.
It's a practical necessity.
It is, yeah.
What does the document say about how those industries can contribute?
One of the key things is engaging with First Nations communities as genuine partners,
Okay.
not just stakeholders.
Yeah.
It's about building authentic relationships based on trust and mutual respect.
So recognizing that indigenous communities have
They have valuable knowledge
Yeah.
and expertise to offer.
and that they should have a say in how those projects are planned and carried out.
Exactly.
The document also talks about cultural awareness training, right?
It does, yeah.
For employees.
For employees at all levels.
If you're working on or near indigenous land
You need to understand its significance.
and how to interact with it respectfully.
Yeah, and that training shouldn't just be a one-time thing.
Right. It needs to be ongoing.
Ongoing. Yeah.
integrated into the culture of the workplace.
Absolutely.
The document also talks about the economic opportunities
It does.
that can be created
Yeah.
through these partnerships.
Through genuine partnerships, yeah.
What are some examples?
One of the most effective is supplier diversity.
Okay.
So actively seeking out
Right.
and contracting with indigenous-owned businesses.
That's fantastic because it's creating jobs,
It is, yeah.
building those local economies.
It's fostering self-determination.
And it goes beyond just procurement, right?
It
It's
does.
about involving indigenous businesses and communities
Yeah.
at all stages of project development.
From planning to implementation, valuing their knowledge and expertise.
So recognizing that indigenous Australians
Yeah.
have been stewards of this land for a very long time.
For millennia.
Yeah, and they have incredible insights to offer.
They do.
What else does the document highlight in terms of...
It emphasizes the importance of protecting and preserving cultural heritage sites.
Yeah, after Juukan Gorge, that seems absolutely crucial.
It is.
How can these companies ensure they're taking the right steps?
Well, it's about developing those mitigation strategies
Okay.
to avoid or minimize impacts
Okay.
on cultural heritage.
Yet if those impacts are unavoidable.
Then it's about consulting with traditional owners
Right.
to find culturally appropriate solutions.
So it's all about communication, collaboration, and respect
It is.
for the connection between indigenous people and their land.
Yeah.
These principles apply not just to these sectors, but to anyone
Absolutely.
working with First Nations communities.
It doesn't matter what industry you're in.
Yeah, it boils down to that fundamental shift in mindset.
It does.
We're all on this journey together.
We are.
And reconciliation isn't just about addressing the past.
It's not.
It's about building a better future
For all Australians.
for everyone.
Yeah.
So, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
where we'll explore some of the broader
Yeah.
societal implications,
Yeah.
let's take a moment to pause
Okay.
and reflect.
Yeah.
What's resonating with you most from our conversation so far?
Yeah. What's sparking your curiosity or inspiring you to take action?
We'd love for you to consider those questions as we continue this deep dive into reconciliation in Australia. Welcome back. So in the first couple of parts of this deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
we've kind of explored what reconciliation means,
Right.
how it's evolved here in Australia.
Yeah.
And you know how both organizations
Mm-hmm.
and individuals
Yeah.
can play a part.
Absolutely.
In this final part, let's sort of broaden the lens a little bit
Okay.
and think about reconciliation's impact
Yeah.
on Australian society as a whole.
It's interesting to consider
Yeah.
that reconciliation isn't just, individual actions or company policies.
Uh-huh.
It can reshape
Mm.
the very fabric of Australian society.
So we're talking about like systemic change.
We are
Yeah.
addressing those underlying
Yeah,
structures that perpetuate inequality.
that's a big conversation.
Yeah.
How do we bridge the gap between where we are now and that ideal future?
Truth-telling is paramount.
Okay.
We need to acknowledge the complete history of Australia, including the impacts of colonization.
Right, so it's about going beyond those
Yeah.
kind of sanitized
Sanitized
versions of history
Yeah.
we're often taught,
We are
and really confronting those uncomfortable truths
confronting the truth.
that maybe have been ignored or minimized
Yeah.
for far too long.
And it's not just acknowledging the past.
Okay.
It's understanding how that past continues to shape the present.
So recognizing those
Yeah.
ripple effects.
Things like intergenerational trauma,
Right.
the systemic disadvantages.
Yeah, the racism that Indigenous Australians
Yeah.
still face daily.
Absolutely. And that's where education becomes essential.
Hmm.
We need to make sure that all Australians
Yeah.
have access to accurate and comprehensive
Mhm.
information about Indigenous history,
Right.
culture, perspectives.
And I guess that education needs to start early, right?
It does in schools, at home,
Mhm.
instilling respect and empathy
Yeah.
from a young age.
But it also goes beyond formal education too, right?
It does, creating platforms for open dialogue,
Hmm.
for listening and learning from each other.
So it's about fostering those
It is.
cross-cultural connections.
Breaking down stereotypes, building bridges of understanding.
Yeah. Another thing that seems really important to me is representation.
Representation is huge.
Yeah.
It's about seeing First Nations people in leadership positions,
Yeah. In the media.
in the media, across all facets of public life.
Right. And that's not about tokenism.
It's not. It's about genuine empowerment,
It's
giving
about-
them a voice
Yeah.
so they can shape their own futures.
And this is where The Uluru Statement from the Heart comes in.
Yeah, the Uluru Statement.
Can you remind us again
Yeah.
what it's calling for?
So, at its core, it's calling for constitutional recognition
Okay.
for Indigenous Australians
Right.
and the establishment of a voice to Parliament.
So Indigenous Australians having a say.
A formal and empowered voice.
At the highest level of government,
Yeah,
it recognizes that the well-being of Indigenous Australians
that does.
is fundamentally connected
It's intertwined with the well-being of the nation.
to the well-being of everyone.
Yeah.
And this is where I think
It is where all Australians have
Yeah.
a role to play.
we all have a responsibility to create a more just,
An equitable future.
yeah.
It's about shifting our mindset, not doing something for Indigenous Australians,
Right.
but doing something with them.
Yeah, like true partnership.
Recognizing them as partners
Yeah,
in shaping a better future for all of us.
that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
Reconciliation requires that.
It requires shared responsibility,
Yeah.
working together.
It's a journey
It is.
that requires honesty
Honest, courage.
and a willingness to challenge those preconceived notions.
Yeah, it's a journey worth taking.
It is.
A reconciled Australia
Yeah,
holds immense potential.
it's a beautiful vision.
It's about healing, justice, creating a society where all Australians can thrive.
This has been such an eye-opening exploration.
Yeah, it has.
Reconciliation.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot.
Yeah.
Definitions, history, the roles of different players,
Mhm.
and now this idea of societal transformation.
Yeah. What stands out to you as the most significant takeaway?
For me, it's that reconciliation isn't a destination. It's a journey.
It's a process
And it's a journey
that each and every one of us
Yeah.
has a part to play in.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
we want to leave you with a question to ponder.
Yeah.
What role will you play
hmm
in shaping the future of reconciliation in Australia?
What actions will you take?
Yeah, what actions, big or small,
Big or small?
would you take to contribute to a more just and equitable society?
Keep the conversation going.
Yeah,
Keep learning.
keep striving for a better future for all Australians.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.